Rhonda, we do have one public speaker. I don't see him in the waiting room, so could you just give me a moment to check in with that person? I'll try
Of
to.
course, of course.
Never mind. He's in the meeting.
Okay, he's here with us.
I just put him in the waiting room, so okay.
Okay, so let's just, do we have everybody? Let me see. Board members, can you please turn your cameras on? So I can make sure. Gloria, Chris, Caruzzi, Ali, Christina. Hi, Julia. I don't see Savian and Nikki. Should we wait another minute for Nikki and Savian?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Nikki's gonna be a couple minutes late. Barb, let me know when Savian comes in.
I'm texting him. You can go ahead and start if you want to, Ananda.
Okay, let's do that because we've just been late for a minute. I would like to call the meeting to order. And the first order of business is we have received no written registration up until this moment. We do have somebody for public, hi Savian, for public comment.
Are you ready for the speaker?
Yes, please.
Thank you. One moment. Okay, Mr. O'Malley, Kevin O'Malley is in the meeting.
Hello, Kevin. You don't have your camera on yet, but whenever you're ready, if you want to turn your camera on, you can feel free to do so. And whenever you're ready, you can turn your mic on and then let us know your comments. Kevin O'Malley, can you hear us?
I can try to call him if you like. I do have his phone number.
Yes, please, Barb.
Okay.
Thank you. Barb, if things are not working out with technology, if my colleagues are okay, we can pause whenever Mr. Kevin O'Malley is ready to come and speak with us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll pause our meeting, hopefully before we get too much into the session to hear for public comment. Next in our agenda is the approval of the public input session minutes dated June 1st, 2020. I move that the minutes from the June 1st, 2020 instruction work group public input session be approved. I would like to get a second, please.
Second, Ali Muldrow.
Ali, second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify, oh, Julia, your advisory vote.
Aye.
Thank you, Julia. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is a move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting date June 1st, 2020. Julia,
Fernanda, those were deferred to the next meeting. They didn't get done, so deferred to November.
sounds good. Thank you so much, Barb.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I think I'm gonna, if you don't hear anything, haven't heard anything, Barb, we'll start for the presentation. Figure out how
Rhonda,
to.
Mr. O'Malley, I can now see his video. Mr. O'Malley, can you hear us?
Mr. Kevin
Mr.
O'Malley,
O'Malley? Yeah, go ahead.
can you hear us? It doesn't seem like he can hear us. Oh.
Okay, we'll try again.
Hey,
Is he in
Barb,
the meeting?
hey, Barb, Dr. Jenkins is waiting in the meeting room. Can you let him in?
Yes, I'm taking care of that now. Thank you. I do not see Mr. O'Malley again. Okay. So,
Okay, we'll try. I'm sorry, Lisa, we're gonna have to pause somewhere in our session if the public speaking person decide, happen to work out their technology. But I wanted to thank you, everyone. I know we did not want to have a long meeting and we're already pretty late. So thank you, everyone, for your all's patience. I wanted just to ground today. It feels such an important meeting to talk about what's happening with early learning, and specifically what's our plan for 4K. I know this last year we talked extensively about the energy and the desire to expand 4K to full-time 4K. We had lots of great conversations about it. And of course, we know so much of that is now being, I don't have good words to describe this, but mudded or pivoted or disrupted, due to the current pandemic and the state of our state right now. But I wanted to just share a couple of things before we start. We'll have a pretty good overview of, what are we talking about when we're talking about early learning? What are we talking about 4K? What is the state that we're coming from? What are the plans? What happened between spring and summer? What are some of the things that we learned? What are some of the transition actions that we made? We'll go through to the extent possible with some demographics and enrollment. There'll be some estimates to those numbers. We'll talk through, I know folks are really interested around the curriculum and assessment. And then we'll have some time for questions. Nikki, did you have a question?
Just would we also discuss if possible start dates of not just 4K, but then virtual learning if we're staying virtual? Will that be in this discussion or at a separate one?
Yes, we'll talk about, I don't know if I understood your question. So your question is the start date for?
I had two questions. Start date on the pilots on 4K, because it said that we would start the 2 pilots, but I couldn't find the date and when the 2 pilots or if they'd already started. And
Yes.
the other one was if we stay virtual or not, will that be discussed or not? Because I get a lot of emails on that and I do not know, so I cannot answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for previewing the questions to us. I'll get Lisa to introduce our new staff and get us going with the presentation. And when we pause, please take notes of questions as it's coming up. We'll, have a time to do a round robin and then get everybody's voice, because I know this is something that I have heard a lot of you all advocate and you feel strong about it. So with that, Lisa, please take it away and yeah, please get us started.
Thank you, Ananda. I appreciate that. So tonight is the first conversation in my 8 years in this job where we are actually talking about 4-year-old kindergarten. I think it is really exciting and it is very positive, and it's a real opportunity to explicitly discuss both what we are doing in early learning in 4K and then also what we're thinking about full day 4K. We see this as such an investment in our youngest learners in the district, an investment in our families, and really an investment in our community. And we're looking forward to hearing feedback, getting questions from you around this explicit equity strategy for our most vulnerable children and families. So tonight you're going to hear, I'm going to set you up a 2-part presentation. The first part of the presentation is sharing a little bit about where we're at right now with early learning and 4K. How does that look in a virtual environment? What did enrollment look like? And what are some of the strategies that families are using with their littlest ones at home during this virtual time? During that portion, we'll also talk a little bit about our MEP partnership, our research partnership that we have that Beth Vade and Andrew's team have been working with us on, and where we actually have all kinds of really valuable data that supports a move to full day 4K. So we'll pause there on Ananda's cue for feedback and questions, and then we'll move forward into the presentation on full day 4K. We see this as the first of several presentations and updates. So we know that you'll still have questions after this, but we wanted to provide you just with our initial thinking right now, and that what we're thinking about in a phased process moving forward. So just know we think this is the first of more updates and conversation that we will have. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Colleen Watoon. She is our Director of Early Learning. She's starting her 3rd year with us. And if you remember, we had a strategic equity project a number of years ago around early learning and a specific focus on that moving forward. So I am happy to have Colleen with us. She is going to kick us off when I'm finished with this. And then I also want to thank Carletra Stanford and Dr. Tremaine Clardy for being here, our elementary chiefs who will be seeing this work through over the pilot phase and implementation phase, and leading the district through this work as well. And I'd also like to say that this is a real opportunity to solidify our thinking and our language about 4K. We are a 4K through 12 district. Our 4K classrooms are in our schools. They are part of our schools. It is not a separate program. It is part of who we are as an MMSD community. And I'm happy to have that conversation about that with you all tonight. So Colleen, I am going to turn it over to you next.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Barb, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So the Department of Early Learning encompasses birth to 5 programming. 4K is part of our department, as well as Play and Learn. We collaborate with our early childhood special education staff in student services, as well as our collaboration with 4K with our early care and education centers. Our early care and education centers are our community centers that offer 4K programming in the district. Next slide. So Play and Learn, to begin with, is a parent education model that we offer in Madison. It has been going on for almost 30 years in Madison, and many school districts around the state come to Madison in order to observe our Play and Learn programs, as well as we have many college students who come and do their practicum hours within our Play and Learn model as well. Play and Learn is a facilitated play setting that happens in weekly sessions across 16 community-based sites. They're offered in English and Spanish. We did offer Play and Learn virtually in spring and in summertime. But in fall, we felt that it was important that we support MSCR Cares, and so we are supporting them through this first fall virtual experience. We offer family-friendly locations for Play and Learn across the city in multiple sites like Centro Hispano, the Beacon, and also other community center settings. So 4K started approximately in 2011, 2012. A 4K student, we receive 0.6 funding for every 4K student instead of the 1.0 that we receive for kindergarten through 12th grade. We're hoping that the state actually moves in order to support full funding for 4K as well. There is a DPI licensed teacher, just like every other grade level. We have 437 hours of instruction, and 87.5 of those hours, an additional, needs to be for family outreach. We have 52 4K sites across the city. 26 of them are our school sites, and 26 of them are our ECE, or Early Care and Education Community Partner sites. 4K is optional for students and families to take part in. They don't have a mandatory attendance requirement like kindergarten through 12th grade, but 4K is not optional for us to provide. We have to provide 4K programming just like every other grade level. So optional for families to attend, but not optional for us to provide. Next slide. So we have a historically steady enrollment of 4K across the years. In order to increase our 4K options, so families attend 4K and don't attend 4K for multiple reasons. And it might be that their job and their location takes them to a site where their childcare is closer to their work than it is in MNSD. And because it's an optional program, we don't necessarily get all of the students that we have at the kindergarten level. So the blue bars on this chart represent the 4K enrollment levels over the past years, and the orange bars represent our kindergarten levels. So although they go up and down a little bit by students, it's pretty steady across the years. Next slide. So our 4K enrollment numbers this year, unfortunately, have gone down, and we feel that they have gone down because of the pandemic. We feel that, again, families are choosing a couple different things. So families may be choosing a private or parochial setting. They also may be choosing to not send their students to 4K yet this year. As a district in Madison, we believe it's a parent's right and their choice to start the educational trajectory. And so some families are withholding and not starting 4K this year. We also feel that, the virtual learning, we're not face-to-face in all of our locations, and that may also be affecting our numbers. So on this slide, I present the enrollment from last year compared to our enrollment this year. So we're approximately 300 students behind in our enrollment. We are thinking that there's going to be a bump once we start back face-to-face, and that we may find additional students that are going to enroll in our programs. Overall, our enrollment between our different race and ethnicity groups are pretty consistent. There's a 1% drop across all race and ethnicity groups from last year to this year. And so that makes up the students that are not attending. Next slide. So in 4K for our curriculum and assessment, we use Creative Curriculum is our curriculum. It is a play-based assessment that's research-based. It's also a widely used assessment across the nation for early learning programs. It focuses on studies of interest where teachers are able, in order to set up a study from 4 to 6 weeks, to dig into learning lots of different concepts about a particular topic. It's culturally relevant and has lots of multicultural texts in order that are included within the curriculum. We also use Second Step as an additional focus with our social emotional learning. Creative Curriculum actually does focus on social emotional learning, and we did a year-long study of instructional quality. And MEP found that our 4K teachers excel at providing emotional support, cultivating positive climate for students and families, and implementing multiple instructional approaches. And our curriculum is part of this work. For virtual, we also provide daily learning plans that are aligned to the Wisconsin Model of Early Learning Standards. It's based in our curriculum, as well as they're provided in English and Spanish for families. With our assessment, we use Teaching Strategies Gold, and Teaching Strategies Gold is a widely used child developmental profile. It is rubrics that provide assessment from birth to 3rd grade. And so teachers are able to find where students are and where they need to be going next in their learning trajectory. In order to focus for virtual learning, we focused on the gold fall checkpoint. We were focusing on 9 focus standards that align to our kindergarten readiness standards as well. So Pre-K Pals is our state mandated literacy screener, and we're going to be doing that in the spring, hopefully when we're back face-to-face. Lisa, did you have anything additional to add about assessment?
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. I appreciate that. Just what we were talking about this morning around assessment, Colleen, right, is that the Teaching Strategies Gold is an observational assessment that's done over time. So this is not about assessment that takes away from learning time or is evaluative. This is a very formative rubric-based assessment that actually our 4K teachers receive ongoing training on, so that they know what the look-fors are, and you, Colleen, as the director, know what the look-fors are for high quality 4K classrooms, those indicators. And I will be just as interested, I think, as all of you in how actually Pre-K Pals will be implemented in the spring, or if the state will still mandate that. We will have to wait and see. More to come on that, but I did just want to emphasize that when we talk about assessment, it is actually very much integrated into how learning happens in a 4-year-old classroom.
Lisa, excuse me a moment. The person that I was waiting for public comment looks like it's ready now. Do you mind if we just interrupt? I'm really sorry, Colleen. We're interrupting the presentation just briefly to get Mr. O'Malley on a screen. And then Lisa, whenever you're ready to stop sharing as well. Thank you.
I think Barb's got that. Okay, thanks, Barb.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for the flexibility. Let's hope it's gonna work this time.
Working on it, Ananda. One moment, please.
No problem.
Ananda, I keep getting a voicemail, so I will ask him to submit a written statement. Okay? Thank you very
Yes,
much.
please. Thank you so much. And please tell him we're really sorry that we weren't able to make this work.
Thank you.
Lisa, yeah, thank you, Barb. You may proceed.
Okay, and I think we're moving on to the next slide.
Okay,
Lane?
yep. So when the pandemic happened, we all went virtual, and that included 4K. And so virtual learning, we provided virtual learning options just like kindergarten through 5th grade, and we provided those 5 days a week. 4K MMSD teachers used Google Classroom to provide those daily lessons. All families were given access to Ready Rosie. MMSD teachers uploaded daily videos for students and families. And then we also provided some paper and pencil type activities for those families who were not able to get online. Next slide.
Can people mute if you're not speaking, please? We hear a lot of background noise. Thank you.
Not sure where that's coming from. Thank you.
Okay, so what we learned from virtual learning during those months was that families wanted more synchronous direct contact with teachers, and they wanted more feedback in student learning and more rigorous instruction. We also learned that Google Classroom was not accessible for those without email addresses, and 4K was not part of the technology plan initially. So 4K students did not have Google email addresses. We also learned that families without a device couldn't participate in virtual learning, and 4K was not included in virtual learning in the distribution of devices initially. And so again, this year we tried to make some accommodations in order to try to meet the needs of those different problems that were occurring. Next slide. So we have two different areas in 4K. We have our 4K at our MMSD sites, and we have our 4K at our ECE sites. Remember, ECE is early care and education sites. So in our MMSD sites, our teachers are doing synchronous learning. They're doing large group instruction, small group instruction, and individual sessions. We're making sure that we maintain that amount of time that research suggests that 4K students should not be on virtually more than an hour. So we want to make sure that our large group is anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, and that our small and individual lessons would be more of a family contact and connect, so that we really need a partnership with our 4K families in order to connect with our families about virtual learning. We're also providing asynchronous activities through Ready Rosie, as well as we are doing the daily learning plans, different choice options, and teachers are extending learning throughout the day, not only on the screen, but also off the screen. Next slide. In our early care and education sites, we're providing virtual instruction through those sites as well. Those teachers are also providing the synchronous and the asynchronous activities. They're also using Ready Rosie, and they are also providing some face-to-face learning opportunities at the child care centers. So 4K is not part of MSCR Cares. So we needed to incorporate our instruction with our child care centers, and our child care centers are meeting face-to-face, and they're doing a wonderful job following the CDC guidelines and ensuring that our students and families are safe at their sites. Next slide. So our virtual experience for fall really includes a partnership, and it's a partnership between the teacher and the child and the family. We're working with them with our curriculum and assessment in order to, again, be collaborative and ensure that we are forming a partnership with our families. Students typically log on for a 20-minute whole group lesson, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday in the morning or afternoon. And then teachers collaborate with families for more individualized instruction or assessment. Assessment is not looked at as a test or something that we are assessing students in the typical assessment term, but the assessment is a collaboration between parents and families. And it's conversations, and we're using the developmental rubrics and checklists from our assessment in order to ensure students are at the right place and offering scaffolding support in order to help get them where they need to go. They're also, all families have been receiving Ready Rosie playlists, and Ready Rosie provides 2-minute parent modeling videos with very limited materials of things that families can do at home. For example, it might be looking in their cupboard and describing at things that are in their cupboard. Very simple activities with materials that they have in the home. And families can actually access Ready Rosie videos that are offered from birth to 2nd grade. So families and teachers can actually individualize the videos that are sent to them on the level of the students. So it's a great way to demonstrate how to do those simple activities at home with children. Next slide. So this is the data. So the nice thing about Ready Rosie is that it actually comes with a data piece. It's a two-way communication system. So when a parent watches a video, that they can actually send a comment to the teacher, and the teacher, it's connected with our Teaching Strategies Gold. So they're actually able to be commenting on a specific assessment that the teachers may be looking at for their gold assessment. So the family watches the video, they reply how the child did on the video, any other information. The videos are provided through text message or email in English and Spanish. And again, from our learnings from last year, we realized we needed to ensure that every household had access in order for 4K students to get online. And so we're now providing devices so that we're ensuring that every household has a device. 4K students do not necessarily need to be on the computer as long as what the other students in other grade levels need to be, but we need access to be able to see the information and resources that teachers are providing, and also be able to have that one-on-one connect with the teacher, because the Zoom meetings are very important. And so last year alone, and this was just the data information from spring, families viewed over 9,728 videos. There were over 22,000 learning objectives that were learned through those videos, and we connected with over 1,134 of our families. So families get to choose. They say yes or no, whether or not they want to participate in Ready Rosie. And so it's really important that we make those connections with families. Next slide. So our department is actually facilitating daily learning plans, and we create daily learning plans for the virtual learning. So teachers can use these daily learning plans in order to access information from our curriculum and the Wisconsin Model of Early Learning Standards. We're ensuring that all areas of the development are included, including fine motor, gross motor, literacy skills, math skills, and we're also making sure that we're doing some reflection pieces and some social emotional connections as well. So there is a link on this slide if you'd like to see the daily learning plans up close and be able to see some of the links. Again, they are all provided in English and Spanish. Next slide. We also felt that it was important that our 4K students had a supply kit at home at the beginning of the year. So our department created over 1,600 supply kits for students across the district. So supply kits were sent to all 4K students in MMSD schools and early care and education sites. It also fulfills 4 months of our DPI required family outreach hours. And those outreach hours are also translated in not only English, but also provided in Spanish and Hmong. I just included a list of the materials that were included in the kit, as well as we got them to all teachers before the start of the school year. Next slide. So our families appreciated being able, so many of our teachers actually did either drive-through supply pickups, or they did driveway visits where the teacher came and did social distancing and visited with families and met the students at the end of the driveway. So families really appreciated being able to meet teachers. Students were so excited to see what was in the bag. We had multiple books plus so many activities within the bag that they were excited to see what was in the bag. And teachers really appreciated knowing that all of their students had a consistent set of materials and manipulatives that they could incorporate into their instruction. Next slide. So the Madison Education Partnership, or MEP, we've worked very closely with MEP consistently throughout 4K. And 4K has really, our department has really worked collaboratively in order to use the information that we've gotten from the research studies in order to focus in on improvements for our 4K program. You're going to see that within these next 2 slides, there are a lot of links to different research studies. We've done over 20 studies in the 4K area, and we've worked with over 150 plus staff across many sites, almost all of the sites. And the information that we're learning from the study, we're really using to incorporate to make improvements in our 4K program every day. Our MEP research finds that the average 4K student scores higher on 4K fall kindergarten PALs than 53% of the incoming MMSD kindergartners who did not attend 4K. And the difference is even greater for our students of color or low-income students who attend 4K. They scored 58% higher than their peers who did not attend 4K. So our 4K program is really making a difference and meeting the needs of the students that we want to reach. Next slide. So these are just some of the different points that we've learned through our MEP research. And it's also a lot of the basis for the decisions and the directions that we're moving within our program. I collaborate regularly with MEP and the staff, and we really try to incorporate all of the things that we're learning into our everyday practices. 2 of the research studies that we're working on right now. One is focusing on 4K to 5K transition, and we're looking at better ways to incorporate 4K to 5K transition into our daily work. And then we also did a year-long study of instructional quality for 4K, and that found that our 4K teachers really excel at providing emotional support and cultivating a positive climate for students and families and implementing multiple approaches of instruction. So we're really excited about the collaboration with MEP and working closely with the university, and then really using that information in our day-to-day work. Next slide. So I'm just going to pause here in order to provide an opportunity for questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have.
I thought we were going to cover the research. wanna-
The MEP slides were the research slides. We have some additional research in the full day 4K, but we're at that
This is
point.
okay? All right. Thank you. Barb, whenever you can stop sharing, please. And I'll have Savian, Chris, Caruzi, Schmidt, Nikki, Ali, and Gloria. Savian, you're first.
Real quick, is this the full day 4K presentation as well? Or is that later?
The full day 4K pilot presentation is after this point. So we'll
Okay.
do that next.
I'll reserve my comments and questions for then. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Caruzi?
No, thank you so much for the update. Like Savian, most of my comments and questions are for the full day pilot update. Yeah, so I will reserve my comments until that point.
Great. Schmidt?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick questions, and thank you very much for this information. I was really excited myself to hear about the supply kits that went out because for 4K, that hands-on learning is so important, and also the connections that teachers were able to make with students. I'm wondering, as we continue, is there another supply kit going out, or more books or things going out to students? Is that something that we're able to arrange or something that's happening?
So at this time, until we make the decision, the supply kits were to cover through December and to cover the family outreach through December. So at this time, that would have covered our virtual experience through the beginning of the year. If a decision is made that we would continue, we would definitely look into seeing what additional supplies and resources teachers might need. But our teachers really need to be part of that conversation.
Right, that makes sense. And I really appreciate the partnership that you have all had with MEP. I'm curious, is this an ongoing partnership, or is this a limited time partnership? Is it bound by grant funding or something else like that? Because I'm hoping that it can continue.
I'm going to have Beth share a little bit about that. She has been working and has been our partner with MEP, and she has been just our strong link to that work. And I know that there's actually an RFP that's going out for MEP moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, super excited about the work that we've done. Colleen and Early Learning have been a fantastic partner to work with in the research space. So I speak for our sort of entire UW MSD team that Early Learning has been an amazing space for us to work in. So the partnership actually began in 2016, and the plan is that it is a long-term sustained collaboration. So this is something that MEP works in multiple research areas, not just early learning, but early learning was our first sort of project area and the most robust area we have now. And we've managed to actually expand a lot of that work out nationally, sort of collaborating with other school districts across the country on their early learning work. So I think we're, if Colleen continues to have us, we're pretty set on working together moving forward, and we're really excited. We actually just put out a call for proposals that we're funding new researchers from UW to come forward for small and large grants to take on some challenges we have right now in the district, including early learning and early literacy. So more work to come for sure.
That's great, thank you. And then the last quick question I have is sort of around the fact that early learning seems to go beyond 4K and encompasses those, K, first grade, second grade levels, and was kind of hoping for an update on how we're doing virtually with those groups too. I don't know if that's coming at another time, but just looking at the, I guess, the amount of synchronous time that's being required of our pre-Ks, our littlest ones, 20 minutes a day, and then sort of hearing how things are rolling out at kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and just a little bit concerned or just wondering about the structure that we might be imposing on schools, and if it's, I guess, just if you're getting feedback on that, and if we have flexibility and nimbleness to pivot our directions for schools to help with that if that's a concern.
Chris, I can start on that, and then maybe Tremaine or Carletra can add. So tonight's presentation was pretty much focused on Play and Learn in 4K. We have been getting some feedback all along the way about how parents and students are experiencing virtual learning. And we do need to make some adjustments moving forward, and we will definitely communicate that in a different space. Appreciate the questions, and we do have some things to respond to and some things to really calibrate around moving forward. Tremaine?
Hey, thanks for that. It's a great question. And as educators, as great educators, the one thing that we pride ourselves on is being able to adjust and reflect and adjust when we are looking at systems, and the virtual definitely falls into that. We are learning that there's a lot of calibration, as Lisa just mentioned, but there's also even calibration around how we're talking about things like screen time and how we're labeling, screen time to you, maybe something to me different to me. Does it mean the screen is off and I'm completely away from the computer? Or does the screen time just mean that when there's no longer a whole group of instruction, but the computer is still on? So, those are some of the things that we're trying to get a deeper understanding on how we're talking about instruction, and then actually learning from our staff member, Carletra and I, as many leaders have, are really working with principals and staff to get a good base of what they're experiencing. So talking to staff members around what they experience within a day, and also working with students to kind of follow them through a schedule to see how they're experiencing their day as well. So we can have a better understanding of that student experience and have firsthand knowledge of how to adjust when necessary. So to Lisa's point, yes, those adjustments will come into play. They do come into our decision making, but it's part of our entire system of how we perform as educators to make sure that we are reflecting, checking in, and then making those adjustments in support of our students, and especially our most marginalized.
I would just add that as part of that adjustment, we know that there are some things that we need to change because they're not working well for students right now, but there are also some things that are working well for students and for staff. And we also want to capitalize on that to see how we can continue that in other schools for the student experience. So we're looking at both. And as Dr. Clarity said before, we are having meetings with classroom teachers to see what they're experiencing. We're talking to students, we're talking to parents. And so we're really making sure that we're listening to stakeholders as we make these pivots for the upcoming quarter.
That's great. I really appreciate those answers. And I know that virtual learning is a challenge for all levels of students and teachers. Just the feedback I've been getting is that especially at that K-2 level, there have been unique challenges that we need to address. And I really appreciate hearing that that's already happening and that's already on the radar. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Christina.
Amanda.
Thank you. Nikki and then Ali. Nikki, your mic is off.
I want to reiterate what Christina Gomez-Schmidt said. I'm hearing a lot of parents of K-2 second graders say some things worked really well and then worrying that their kids are getting a bit overloaded. The most things I'm hearing about are the asynchronous Wednesdays. I'm hearing from both teachers and parents that the asynchronous Wednesdays are the hardest to find care for those who work out, the parents that work outside the home, because their kids are pretty much too young to truly work asynchronously. Instead of our net positive. But they are too young to work by 100% by themselves. So I'm glad to hear that we have a way to deal with that, because I was getting a little nervous. I mean, I know you guys are the experts, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't burn. I don't want an 8-year-old having a Zoom meltdown. On the other thing, my questions, I'll save the most for 4K. The only major questions I have are regarding on when that decision on reopening is, because I have a lot of worried parents who've been emailing, calling, texting, and I'm honest, I do not know. That is not in my control. That is not something I know. But any guidance in that area would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Nikki. Lisa, Tremaine, do you have any comments? I really just stayed kind of tight today. Okay, Nikki, is it okay for one of the staff just follow up with you?
The only,
Dr. Jenkins, did you read? Oh, sorry, Nikki. Dr. Jenkins, did you have a comment? Oh, turn your mic off, please. Mic on.
I will be following up with all the board members this week on that. I just received a recommendation from SLT. Great question. We have a response. And before I stop, I have to say, Colleen and the team, great response. You did a fabulous job. This is what we've been working on, not just reopening, but how can we refine right now what we're doing and get better at virtual learning? And we have heard all of those concerns and we're responding to those. Thank you. But you guys did a wonderful job.
and I just have one more thing, and that is, I know we broke things down on race. Can we also break down how individuals with disabilities are doing the next time we go through the data?
Yeah, I think we highlighted that this morning, Nikki. Colleen, do you have any comments, or this is something that you're following up with?
So again, students with disabilities in 4K. 4K is a tricky year with data and focusing in on data for different groups of students. So our students with disability percentage is only at 6% right now because we're at the beginning of the school year. And 4K is oftentimes the year where we begin identifying students. So the students who are labeled as students that have disabilities right now are students that came to us as 3-year-olds. Many of them through the Birth to 3 program or other referrals. So at this point right now, many of our students are going through our MTSS process, and they're creating student support teams, and they're looking at the developmental appropriateness and where students are with disabilities right now. So those are our numbers right now with students with disabilities. So
Thank you.
hard number to focus in on at 4K. We know that the majority of our students in 4K are identified, and the biggest disability label is speech and language, and that is due primarily to many students learning language at this point in time. And so more numbers to come on students with disability. Our English language learning students is also difficult to identify at the 4K level because our students are not identified as an ELL until approximately April of the kindergarten year. So right now, any students that are identified as ELLs are considered potential ELLs because they're not tested as of yet. And testing at the 4K level is very tricky and really inappropriate at this time in order to test them for ELL status.
Thank you, Colleen. Ali? Thank you, Nikki.
No problem. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I greatly appreciate your questions, Nikki, and I appreciate the entirety of this presentation. I want to hone in really specifically on the benefits of 4K, which you spoke to so eloquently, in terms of comparing our 4K students to our kindergarten students and folks who have had 4K opportunities versus young people who haven't, and disaggregating that data. Because we know that, 4K has been something that folks opt into for a variety of reasons, given what families need in terms of support. How are we using the curriculum that enables our students to be more successful in kindergarten and 4K to support the kiddos in kindergarten who maybe didn't get 4K? And Lisa, this question is really directed at you because you've talked so much about, accelerated learning and, when kids are a little behind, just getting them caught up. So how are we strengthening 4K and also using the strengths of 4K to inform early childhood learning across the board? And then Carletra, I'd love if you can enhance this question as well.
Yeah, Ali, thank you for asking that. It is the work that we're doing moving forward around the focus on early literacy. right? A strong 4K program is a really necessary on-ramp for students entering 5-year-old kindergarten. Part of this process of early learning and even early literacy, right? It involves a strong 4K program. It involves a really strong transition from 4K to 5K. We actually offer in our summer school a program for all four-year-olds going into 5-year-old kindergarten, whether they've attended 4K or not. So it's there are so many opportunities in the summer, and that I think summer school provides us with a real like learning lab and figuring out what works and what we can do to strengthen our connections with families. And then I think it's really important too, as we think about the transition to 5th grade, that we have a really informative early screener to know how kids are coming in and what strengths they have in areas where they might need a little bit more support. So focusing on having really high quality teachers in kindergarten and 1st grade and honing in on those focused standards in kindergarten and 1st grade so that we're able to get pre-literacy skills and then really strengthen the science of reading instruction that you'll be hearing more about in November, to make sure that our early primary teachers, kinder and 1st grade, really know how to teach reading in those grades. And our 4K teachers really know the pre-literacy teaching and skills that are necessary. Carletra?
I would agree, of course, with everything that Lisa just said, and just add that that professional development for teachers is extremely important during this time of early literacy. I know that in our schools that have the 4K program, there are transition meetings as well that take place so that we have accurate assessment data. The teachers are meeting to determine like what are the next steps for these students. And just, again, the importance of professional development, the importance of early literacy, specifically around the science of reading that we're going to be getting into, and letters is going to be something that is going to be able to strengthen that transition year from 4K to 5th grade, or I said 5th grade, 4K to 5K.
Thank you.
I would also say, Ali, one more thing, and this is really sort of clarifying language. You know, when I started in this position in Madison, we always sort of talked about being a K-12 district, and then there was 4K. I think over the years, we have strengthened that language and that perspective and the culture of we are a 4K through 12 district. Those are our children. And the fact that Carletra said we're making those connections in schools, and 4K is part of what happens when they're on the playground, how they interact with other children, bringing that community feel to 4-year-old kindergarten classrooms. They're part of a school community. And I think that that's really important when we think about just this equity imperative to making sure that we're really supporting those families and children socially and emotionally, and also academically. And I know Colleen will say at some point where a 4-year-old lands is the place they want to stay, right? That's the homeschool where they want to stay. They know the school, they know the buildings. So it's one of the reasons that we want to talk about full day 4K and how much it matters to kids to place where kids are situated, and then also the kind of instruction that they have when they're interacting with the teacher. Sorry, Ellie, I think I might have interrupted you.
No, that's
You're
completely
passionate about this. Can you hear me?
I love listening to you all speak to early childhood. It is like some of the warmest and fuzziest conversations we get to have as a board. So it's nice to be deeply rooted in where kids get their start. I think my last question is just about kind of accommodations and materials and play-based learning, especially as we've gone virtual. And I really appreciate folks speaking to getting kids device and getting kids materials. I've heard great things anecdotally about teachers kind of going the extra mile to make sure kids are getting what they need specifically and especially, but across the board, how are we accommodating students and making sure that diverse learners are being equipped with diverse tools?
So So play-based instruction is the cornerstone of 4K. And I love the responses that I hear from Lisa and Carletra about 4K and the focus, especially on this alignment of a 4K 12, or even if we should say a pre-K 12, because we have 3-year-olds who are special education students. So we are a pre-K 12 district. And the great thing about play-based learning is that we can accommodate students at all of their various needs and levels. Many of the daily learning plans that we're creating, we're ensuring that not only are we meeting the needs of literacy, but we're also meeting all the needs, because 4K is really about whole child development. Because if fine motor and gross motor and our math skills are off, our literacy is going to be off too. If our social emotional skills are off, then again, all subject areas are connected. And so it's really important that as a 4K level, we're focusing on the whole child, all of development at one time. And play-based learning is the way to be able to do that. Our teachers are equipped with creative curriculum, which is a play-based curriculum, but it's also equipped with Teaching Strategies Gold, which has developmental rubrics, so that teachers not only know where a student has been, but also where they need to go. And so we can accommodate for student levels at multiple levels. And we know, our teachers know what comes before a skill and a focus standard, and then what comes after, so that we're meeting the needs of various diverse learners.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Hold on, Nikki. I'm gonna go Gloria. Or Sabian, or you, you all changed on my screen. So,
So
I think it was Gloria.
Just quickly, you know, I really love Play and Learn at Central. I mean, I've been there, it's amazing. Just so culturally focused. And I'm just wondering, you know, just going off of what Ali is talking about, is that sort of built into the other sites? It is. So,
yeah.
Okay. And can you talk about how, I mean, is it reading? I mean, is it the, you know, play-based? And so how do we equip, you know, them to really be culturally focused in their teaching in 4K?
And I just have to say, there isn't one exact way how. All of 4K is based on social emotional learning and building relationships with families. So that's our initial input, and part of that is ensuring that our families have what they need in order to be successful within our programming. Building those relationships, understanding the cultural needs of families, that's all part of the learning that goes on at 4K, but also exposing all 4K students to multiple perspectives and multiple areas when we're having conversation and building up those social emotional responses. We not only have rubrics for our literacy and math, we also have rubrics for our social emotional development, and students are focusing in on that development all the way through.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. I'll go around again. Sabian and Nikki, and we're gonna move on.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for mentioning how we are a 4K through 12 district as a Head Start baby. I really appreciate that. Hopefully we can be a prenatal care to 12 district at some point one day too. I guess my question is, you know, one of the biggest benefits of all day 4K is the possibility for trauma-informed care. Are there ways that we're able to support students and families with any mental health care needs that they may have throughout this time?
So we can talk about that a little bit more in the next set of slides, but one of the recommendations that we're making for our full day 4K is actually that those sites are situated within community school sites that have stronger wraparound care and may even have behavioral health and school staff there. So we can talk about that a little bit more, but that was the thinking around where those first sites might land.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Um,
Lisa. Oh, Nikki, go ahead.
My question is, I'm thrilled with the whole child, please, do not get me wrong, but we're going to see children with a specialty, say art, say music, say reading, that is way ahead of their other skills. How do we make sure those gifts aren't lost because we're focusing so much on things they may not be as good at? How do we still preserve that while still educating the whole child?
And that is another benefit of play-based learning, because through play-based learning, you can accentuate those gifts that students have, and you can accelerate those skills, as well as be able to do some flexible grouping opportunities where you're meeting more individualized instruction in order to scaffold what students need in what areas. And so it's not about everybody doing the same thing at the same time. It's about, students really exploring and developing their skills, along with teachers scaffolding and supporting the work that students need in order to close opportunity gaps.
Because I like Savian's point where he said he was in birth to 3. I was in gifted and talented when I was a kid, but I had to fight to get in because they said you couldn't be disabled and gifted until I got too many questions right. And then they decided to finally let me in because they figured I must have learned something. And that actually was what the teacher directly said. I guess you learned something. So I just want to make sure we've moved on from that way of handling that situation to a much more humane method.
Definitely.
Thanks, Nikki. Ready for the continue the presentation? Thank you so much for the answers, and thank you, Ali, for pausing us and getting us all excited about or re-excited about early learning conversation.
Okay, so I think we're ready to launch into the second portion of the presentation, full day 4K. And as I said, it is a critical component to our overall early literacy strategy. We'll talk a little bit about some of our work and thinking about this full day 4K. And I will say that Colleen brings with her experience being an early learning director in the city of Racine. She also was the principal of an early learning site. And she was the one that started full day 4K in Racine. So she really knows the ins and outs. She's had direct experience with it. And we were happy when she joined Madison that she would lead us down this path to eventual full day 4K. Next slide, please. I will say, although we will not discuss it in great detail, we have as a board and the shared leadership of the district talked a little bit about what does a pilot mean in MMSD, what does it mean to scale, how do we figure out what works. This is a link to the document that we have right now, continuous improvement, evaluation cycles, and scaling what works in MMSD. And we have been using these questions as we're starting to think about this, and we'll be revisiting these questions over time. Next slide, please. So as we were thinking about this and as we're moving forward, we wanted to ask ourselves the following questions that were listed here. And this is something that we'll come back to the board with and talk about. And if the answers to these questions above were mostly positive and we have data and research that supports these questions and a way to start and try to fund it, we think it's worth trying. And as we continue to come back and look at how do we know if we've had success and what has the impact been on students and families, then all of that data and these answers will really inform potential expansion and what we're thinking moving forward. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a segue to let you know that document is out there. And those questions were certainly questions that we have been thinking about. And many of these have been validated by the research as well. So we'll keep going and talk about some of the intricacies of full day 4K. Carletra.
All right, thank you, Lisa. I just want to reiterate the great opportunity that we are presented with in piloting full day 4K and MMSD. We know that there is a great deal of research that shows the importance of early learning for students. And more specifically, there's research that indicates that students who attend 4K full day outperform students who attend half day in both literacy and numeracy. And we know that these effects then are sustained through first grade. And this research also further supports and highlights the importance of the work that we will do as a district to intentionally address early literacy. Next slide. And we talked a little bit about this before, but Madison Education Partnership Research highlights several benefits of full day 4K, which includes, again, the numeracy and literacy skills, the enhancement of social emotional awareness and motor skills, and especially the benefit of students of color and economically disadvantaged students. As the previous principal of Mendota, there was a very successful 4K program in place, but we often receive feedback from parents that suggested that one barrier to accessing 4K was that the program was only offered half day. So the full day 4K pilot would allow us to reach another demographic of students and families that otherwise would not have access to 4K due to parent work schedules and childcare availability with the current half-day model. Dr. Clarity? Next slide, please.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford, appreciate that. So on the next two slides, as a district that values and utilizes the voices of families to inform our decision-making and strategic actions, we're really excited to communicate our family-centered qualitative and quantitative data on these next two slides. Beyond the visual data in front of you, we want to uplift the intentionality of who is represented in our data and our commitment to uplifting previously marginalized voices. From our families, we heard the theme of appreciation for exploring full day 4K as it makes MMSD more attractive to emerging families. We know this is important because as we know, once we lose families to surrounding districts, they rarely or never return to a MMSD school. We also heard from our families that full day 4K access is a key equity strategy in changing disproportionate outcomes to our most vulnerable students. I have the next slide, please, Bart. Quantitative results from over 1,900 households with children under 4 indicate a high level of interest in a full day 4K model. Respondents saw access to full day 4K as a resource and support to children developing skills in socialization, recreation, and academic preparation. The responses also found full day 4K to be far more convenient for families when compared to half-day options. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen, who's going to show how this is aligned and coherent by discussing the community partnerships.
So as part of our priority project from the strategic framework, we created an early learning collaborative network. And this collaborative network was a group of community organizations that came together in order to talk about the important topics that early learning faces. And one of those topics was full day 4K. We actually discussed those benefits to students for full day 4K. And we also discussed the consideration of burdens and the financial impact on our early care and education sites, and understanding that we need to be collaborative with these sites as we're moving forward with any decisions we're making, and that we need to make sure that we're all moving forward together. The Department of Public Instruction really encourages all different models of 4K, including those models where we have community partners and school sites. And so it's really important that together we're moving forward on something like this, and that we're able to make sure that we're including them in our response as well, so that the community is moving forward. Next slide. So the pilot for full day 4K, and again, this is a pilot, and we did a similar pilot when I started full day 4K in Racine. We started out a pilot with a few classes where we could gather information and we could learn from what we gathered. And so that is what this pilot is as well. We start out with implementing 2 full-day 4K classes, 1 English section and 1 Spanish section. In the second year, we maintain those 2 classes and we add 1 more so that we're making sure that in our English program, we're including all of those students. The Spanish program, we should only need 1 section, but if we need to add an additional section, then we'll have to have considered further talks about that. But there should only be a need for 1 section of Spanish. And then we also want to add in an early care and education site. And how would we pilot a full-day program happening in an early care and education site? If the Department of Public Instruction tomorrow says that we are going to fully fund 4K at 1.0 for all students, the district is going to look at and say, how can we bring full day 4K into our district? And in order to be able to do that successfully, we need to make sure that we have a strong collaborative community partnership with our early care and education sites as well. They are doing the work of early care and education. And as Savion was talking about birth, they are birth all the way through 4K. So it really is a strong connection to that birth to 5 piece. The third year, we want to make sure that we maintain those sections and that, again, we're continuing to collect data. So that way, the data that we collect, we can look for potential expansion, budget impacts, and all of the successes that it brings. In Racine, when we implemented full day 4K, we really saw the success of adding that additional instructional time. And we saw that success in our English programs, in our dual language programs, and with our special education students that were dismissed from special ed because of the amount of compounded instruction that was given to them. Next slide. Carletra, do you want to talk a little bit about the site locations and selections?
Yep. So when thinking about the full day 4K pilot, we needed to also think about which schools could be proposed as possible sites. And we wanted the site selection to be one in which adding full day 4K could support and or strengthen specific models that were already present at the school. So the proposal of 2 community schools for the 4K full day pilot was very intentional. As previously mentioned by Lisa, adding full day 4K to Mendota and Leopold would further strengthen our community schools model of providing wraparound services for our students and families. We know that the goal of community schools is to provide comprehensive academic, social, and health services that result in improved educational outcomes for children, and that some of the services that are highlighted through the community schools model include the implementation of high-quality early learning programs and family engagement, including parental involvement and family literacy, all of which are part of 4K programming. So the intentional addition of all-day 4K to these sites would complement and strengthen the work that is already taking place at both Leopold and Mendota. And in addition, as Colleen mentioned as well, this pilot will also allow us to further explore the potential for a future early learning center in MMSD, which would be used to provide learning opportunities to students from multiple schools in an area with limited childcare centers. Next slide, please.
So one of this map that you're looking at currently is actually from the state Youngstar website, and it shows a distribution of where the high quality 5-star sites are located within the city of Madison. The red dots are on the top and the bottom of the slide. That is where Mendota and where Leopold are located. And so you see that there are not very many sites that are located near those 2 sites. So again, this was just further reason for why these sites were chosen. Next slide. So again, we want to reiterate that this is a pilot so that we can learn how best to implement a full day 4K program within our district. And this pilot is to measure outcomes to ensure success. Funding will need to be reevaluated after the pilot in order to be able to ensure that we would continue or expand any type of programming. So there is additional money that the strategic framework as a priority project, that funding that they set aside in order just for this purpose of establishing a pilot. And that funding would be used to help with professional learning and some materials and supplies. The additional funding for the budget of the pilot would come from referendum funding. And this would be up to 1.3 million available over the 3-year pilot. And then what I have listed here is just the cost of each year for the pilot. And you notice the cost does increase over the years because we are adding additional classroom, but it also includes the cost of living increase and increases in salary for teachers and educational assistants as well. The next slide. And so within the board packet, we also included a cover letter, which gives you a summary of the full day 4K pilot, as well as a longer proposal with more detail about the pilot. And that proposal was looked at from the Early Learning Collaborative Network, from information that was gathered there, as well as a cross-functional team that provided input on the initial 4K full day proposal. And that information was gathered together and put into the proposal that you have. So if there is more information that you would like on the full day 4K pilot, it is at your fingertips in that proposal. The full day 4K pilot would not start until next year, and that would start when we begin face-to-face programming. So I would not expect a full day 4K pilot to start in a virtual experience. So we would want to make sure that we are back face-to-face. We all know that virtual learning is not the way that 4-year-olds learn. 4-year-olds learn through play, and they learn through hands-on experiences. And so we want to make sure that when we are doing a full day 4K pilot, that our students have access to all of those supplies and materials. We'll also need to make sure that we engage with families and schools around enrollment and defining what that process of enrollment is going to look like, because we don't know that as of yet. We'll also want to provide ongoing professional learning for 4K teachers in order to ensure that when they're transitioning from a half-day program to a full-day program, there is additional professional learning that teachers do need to focus in on how to extend that learning, but also make sure that they're accelerating the learning so that way they are meeting the needs of each and every student in their classroom. And then we also will make sure that we provide future board updates on progress and provide a board presentation in the fall of 2021 on how it's going. Is there anything further that maybe I missed, Lisa or Carletra?
Nikki, I see you.
Cool.
Carletra, Lisa, anything else?
No, I would just reiterate in the memo that Colleen put together for tonight, there is a more detailed set of criteria for why we chose to start this at Mendota and Leopold. And I would also just like to mention that Colleen and the team used the equity tool. The district approved equity tool. She was talking about benefits. She was talking about burdens. We wanted to really hone in on that as we developed this proposal. So you'll notice that the proposal that is linked in your memo is really built off of the questions that are present in the equity tool.
And just as a building principal and someone who started full day 4K in another district, my 4K teachers that teach full day 4K programming in Racine have commented over and over again that they never want to go back to teaching a half day program. They love the full day program. The families love the full day program. The students love the full day program. And although, again, there has to be this balance between play and engagement of students in order to make a full day program successful. So I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Carletra and Tremaine, for this very comprehensive and in-depth presentation. And thank you for all the additional materials that you set up for us. I'm gonna do a round robin, Savian. But I wanna start with Julia at this time. Julia, did you have any question?
I had a question, not about this part, but from before. I'm just wondering,
Sure.
I remember you kind of gave the statistics about the 53%.
Julia, you're breaking up a little bit.
Of pre-kindergartners end up doing better in kindergarten. Can you hear me?
Not really.
Can you hear me? No.
No, can you turn off your camera for a minute and then try to ask the question again?
Is that any better?
Maybe. Go ahead.
Maybe. Okay. I remember from before you were talking about the statistics of pre-kindergartners doing 53% better in kindergarten. I was wondering, I was kind of confused what you were saying there. Is it that they were doing 53% better than their peers, or that 53% of them were doing better than the ones that didn't go to pre-kindergarten?
Sure. The 53% is 53% of the incoming kindergartners did better than those who did not attend 4K. So they did 53% better than those who did not attend 4K. So.
Wait, sorry, 53% better, or 53% of them did better?
53% of them did better on literacy in the PAL scores than those that did not attend 4K.
So do you think that's like pretty significant, or?
It is.
Because then are 47% of the others still not doing?
So what it's saying is that our students who attend 4K are doing better than our students who did not attend 4K. So, and they do better than over half of them that do not attend 4K. And so that is a good measurement in order to show that our program is working and doing better than those who do not attend 4K at all.
Okay, I see, kind of. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, and it's our 4K, right? So not to say the other 47. So we track which students are already enrolled in 4K before they get into kindergarten. And the majority of them do better when they are transitioning from 4K to kindergarten than students that either attending a different program elsewhere or not attending any program.
I see. Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for that question. It's a really important question when we talk about 4K being, important and a lever of investment. So thank you, Julia, for that question. So I'm gonna go Savian, Nikki, and then Christina Schmidt. Let's do it. Let's do it that way. Savian and Nikki.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Carletra, Lisa, and Colleen, for this detailed information and presentation. I remember talking about this with Lisa and Carletra at our first meeting together, and it's just incredible to see movement on this coming to fruition. As we all know, it's full day 4K is critical for our district to be a thriving, growing, and equitable district too. Much has been said about like stagnant enrollment numbers, which a lot of it can be attributed to low birth rate, but the more we can offer full day 4K, the more we can attract young families and working families who can't afford partial day 4K to move here. As you mentioned, the MEP data shows really good results for our students who are in our 4K programs. And it really benefits our most vulnerable students the most, especially if the instruction is trauma informed and we can support our youngest students with the healthcare they need and prevent the tragic, outcomes of unaddressed childhood trauma. Some of the few questions I do have are, what are the ways we can ensure this remains a targeted equity strategy to close the academic achievement gap? And then I have two other questions.
So one way that we're ensuring that it's a targeted strategy is by choosing the schools where they're located at. And so the full day program would be for those families who live in that attendance area, so that we're ensuring that we are meeting the needs of those areas.
Thank you.
I'll say, Colleen, you identified those two areas as areas where there were the fewest number of seats in accredited daycare centers.
As well, yep.
I'll also say that's a strategic area of the city that we need to keep an eye on, with lots of movement and growth happening in surrounding areas. And then the next one, the state obviously has a huge responsibility to serve all the children in our state, and this is something where the state really has to show leadership on. Should we see movement at the state level, how can we coexist with city childhood centers?
I think part of that is exactly what we're doing, is creating these collaborative partnerships with our early care and education sites, and meeting regularly with them and talking like our early learning collaborative network, so that we're ensuring that we are including them in our decisions and that we're using that information to drive us forward. There has been collaborative bipartisanship support for full day 4K. And we're hoping that that will continue and expand the program into the conversation, so that way equitably throughout the state, we can provide full day 4K programming for all students, and that it's not a district by district decision. I mean, it's really important that our state take up this work as well. Milwaukee has taken up this work, Beloit has taken it up, Racine has taken it up, and now Madison is taking it up. And so it's very important that our state leadership also take up full day 4K and understand the importance of closing these opportunity gaps before they begin. Again, this is our biggest and best equity strategy that we can provide, is providing intense early care and education support.
Thank you so much. And my last question is, we talk a lot about vertical alignment, and I mentioned earlier, we're trying to be a prenatal to graduation district. In doing this work, have we identified any opportunities to find alignment with SAPAR?
Lisa, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think that that's an opportunity for us, Savion, that we have not looked into directly, but as we build out the program and look at sites and look at families that have the greatest need, that's something that we absolutely would consider.
Thank you so much for this work. It's very exciting.
Savion, if I could, I know your question was particularly the SAPAR, but you asked about vertical alignment. I also want to lift up our primary literacy strategy and how important that is in the work, and how this would definitely be a conduit to allowing that to progress at a greater rate. And you'll see the impact vertically through that as we embed that early literacy work in this 4K model, and as it progresses throughout the grade levels.
Thank you.
Thanks, Savion.
My question is, you had stated, Colleen, that if kids did well, they could transfer out of special ed from 4K. Is the goal to transfer out of special ed, or to make sure they still get the services, because they may be doing well because they have the services, and if we remove them too soon, wouldn't we risk the chance of them falling behind?
Definitely. And it's not about transferring out of special ed, but it's about getting children on track. And when children are at an academic level that they are on track, and they are not qualified anymore for special education services, that we dismiss them from special education services. But that doesn't mean that services end, and that means services need to be wrapped around in other ways within our schools, and our community schools are really supportive of that work as well. Many of the students that I talked about within Racine's program, we had multiple students that actually transitioned out of special education. They were dismissed. They no longer met the special education criteria, but that did not mean that they were completely dismissed. They also had wraparound services that they needed to help support them in other areas. But those needs were met through 504 plans or other areas. They were no longer classified as a special education student.
Under 504, though, they could be classified as special ed, just not under IDEA, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. All right, Ali, Christina, and Caruzi and Gloria.
Thank you all for speaking to this presentation. I'm like, this is really kind of where the rubber meets the road, and where it's nice to be able to get really excited about what we'll be able to do and advance in terms of this work in the next few years. And so looking at it throughout 3 years really feels like, wow, this is getting pretty real for the first time. So that's exciting for us as a board to get to be here and be a part of pushing full day 4K forward. I guess my first question is a pretty obvious question. Why is this a pilot? So much research and work has gone into making it very well established that full day 4K benefits young people, that early childhood learning is tremendously impactful. We're talking about this has been studied for decades. Why are we wondering if full day 4K is going to work out for us?
I don't think it's more about why would it work out for us, but how will it work out for us, and making sure that we're intentional with our planning. So that way, when we are rolling out something with a large district system, when we're rolling something out, we need to understand the dynamics of a decision that's being made and how to be able to move that forward effectively. And so it's not so much that we're not saying like full day 4K isn't great. We know it's great. We love it. But it's really about learning from the data, bringing others along with us, and understanding and explaining the data and the support and the importance of it. And then also learning what do we need so that when we do create a program, that it's an effective program. And that's what the pilot is really also going to help us ensure.
Thank you, Colleen. Ali, can I just make a comment to what you said, Ali? Because I didn't think about why we're doing a pilot until you asked the question. But I realize, and I'm drawing parallels to the community schools. When we launched community schools, we also called that a pilot, even though, you know, it wasn't coming, like it wasn't ever going back. It was perhaps a way to say, these are the schools we want to use as a, you know, not just a testing ground, but like as an implementation ground, and then learn from it in order to implement in other places. So I'm wondering if part of this pilot language comes from the sort of the scaling of the nature of the scaling. But thanks, Sally, for that. But you have some more questions.
Yeah, so I had a follow-up question to that question, which is, because we're calling it a pilot, what will be our measurements of success? So how will we know we're doing well? How will we know we want to change something? What will be the cues that really allow for us to use this period of time in which we're not full scale to the benefit of the entire district?
So I have listed in the long proposal a list of the measurements of success and the outcomes that we would use. And there would be a variety of them. So number one, you can't just use a literacy score or a measurement, especially not at the 4K level. But we'll need to make sure that our outcomes are qualitative and quantitative. And so it's not only going to be feedback from staff, it'll be feedback from families. It will also be feedback from the data assessments that we'll be doing through Pre-K PALS and Teaching Strategies Gold, where we can look at multiple areas of development as well, so that we're not, again, literacy is super important and an extremely important strategy, but at the 4K level, it's really about the whole child. So we need to make sure that we're looking at multiple measures of all areas of development as well.
And then I have two last questions, more directed at Lisa. So how will we utilize mixed age classrooms for 4K long-term, or is that something we're talking about and exploring in early childhood? And then also, how are we going to use outdoor space, particularly in looking to the dynamics that we experience with COVID and social distancing, and knowing we want to get our younger learners kind of back into the classroom. MMSD has a rare advantage for metropolitan school districts in terms of the amount of outdoor space we have. How are we utilizing that outdoor space for our full day, four-day kiddos, and also with respect to kind of COVID-19 and learning within a social distancing environment?
Yeah, thank you, Ali. Let me try this, and then Colleen or Tremaine and Carletra, feel free to chime in. I think we are really looking at 4-year-old kindergarten for this proposal. Boy, we would sure hope that the state would kick in funding for a 3-year-old program as well. We do have some mixed age programs in some of our early childhood special education programs, and then the peers that we invite in are 3 and 4 year olds prior to going to 5, but those are only a few select sites. I think your question about how are we using outdoor spaces is actually really intriguing, because as we think about sites moving forward, and we think about the physical layout, the classroom sizes, the outdoor learning spaces, the potential for, as Colleen said, an early learning center, what kind of outdoor space is there, and how could that benefit the little ones that might be at that school and at that location. One of the reasons I would say that we're starting in an incremental way is, it's very integrated with facilities, with school space, with the number of teachers that we have, of course, with costs. And, it's at some point, the topic that boards talk about that can get boundaries, and attendance lines. So we just want to be really thoughtful and start really well in an incremental way, learn from that, and then move forward. And then just wanted to also say, we really need our community partners. Like Colleen, if there's anything you've taught me in this, and I've gone to some of your community collaborative meetings, is that we need those centers. And we want to be very thoughtful about including them in expansion. Some of these centers that offer, part day 4K right now, the families are going there because of that right before morning care, dropping off, little ones at 6:30 or 7. And being able to stay until maybe 5:30 or 6. So we need these community providers. They actually fill a void that we actually couldn't make up in terms of space. So I know Colleen has been really good about being intentional and recognizing the need to have that communication threaded throughout. So long way of saying, Ali, I think space is important, and where we choose to situate these programs has to be based on a lot of different factors.
The importance of outdoor learning is huge as well. And we're going to focus, our part of our curriculum has an outdoor learning opportunities so that it can be included. And very unfortunately, during a half-day program, you don't have enough time in order to be able to really dig into that, those opportunities. And so with the full day opportunities, our full day programs in Racine actually ended up doing more additional outdoor opportunities than they were ever afforded during the half day time as well.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you, Colleen, for answering. Did I say who was going next? Okay, Christina Schmidt.
Thanks, Ananda. Thank you for this presentation. Like the other board members have already said, I'm extremely excited about this. And like Ali saw it and said, oh, can we go faster? But excited to hear about the work and the memos and the report about how to do this. On a broad scale, I'm really interested in understanding the funding model from the state for 4K and the 0.6 reimbursement. And I'm just curious if there's a broader Wisconsin strategy on full 4K, if that's coming down. You talked a little bit about that with Savian's question, but I'm also wondering if there's other states that are models for, they have decided to go in on full day 4K and they are funding it probably to the level it needs. So I'm just curious if that's out there. We don't have to get into a huge discussion on that tonight, but might be something helpful to look at as we, advocate at the state level for that.
So as far as I'm aware, there is not full day 4K in other states as well. And Wisconsin is very progressive in their 4K universal strategy. We continue to learn about what's going on in other states and other models. But again, as far as universal preschool programs that are provided to all, that's pretty unique. And so a lot of the states have some programming, but again, not universal full day. Savian?
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in. That was a great question. I know that a few presidential candidates have released plans for a federal funding model too that will incentivize states to make these moves. And so that'll be something to watch as November happens as well.
Thank you.
I know that, I was going to say, I know Tony Evers, before he was governor, I know it was something that was always on his agenda. And then, State Superintendent Carolyn Stanford Taylor was on her agenda too. I think the budget, thank you, Savian, for speaking to the budget from the federal level. I think that is going to have a huge implication, and hopefully we'll have some news soon after Nikki's birthday.
Let's pray.
All right.
Dr. Jenkins, I saw you unmute. Did you have something that you wanted to add there?
I was trying to just hold back because the conversation has been just really wonderful. And those who know me know that this is really within my wheelhouse. But I really appreciate the way that the staff have responded. I was going to say to you, it varies throughout the country. I've been in national and international discussions about the whole full day, actually prenatal through 12. And so it becomes a political football in terms of the funding decision, construction versus early childhood. The places I've been able to advocate and be able to receive the fundings and the locations I was in from the legislators as part of starting at seed dollars. So even down to the way when we say pilot on this, there's a lot to be learned from 4K programs, and there are proponents of it, and there are also those who are detractors, I consider, of it. But the evidence is there, those students particularly, when you start talking about Black and brown and poor students and special needs students who have that early learning, they have a propensity to perform better than their peers who did not have that experience. There's a language component. This is the whole child. It's not just about core content. This is also about the socio-emotional piece, the detachment for the first time from their parents. It's a lot that goes into 4K. And I just think building it out is a better way to do it, having a measured approach versus just sometimes jumping all in. There's significant sustainability, lack thereof sustainability when it comes to the cost. And we as a district need to have a serious conversation around our philosophy in terms of what we believe is going to be best for Madison. So I was going to save it to another conversation about the science of reading and why we're talking about early literacy like this. That all plays in together. The earlier you can start, the better off. So that's why I was holding back and wasn't going to say anything. I knew I have another point, but since you asked.
Thank you. I have a few just quick questions, more specific to the sites that were chosen. I guess I'm curious, are we replacing half-day 4K classrooms at Leopold or at Mendota with full-day classrooms, or are we adding additional classrooms of 4K? And then another question is, for the second year, Leopold is going to stay at the one section of all day or full day 4K for that second year. And I'm sort of curious about that because they're one of our largest elementary schools in the district. And I don't have the enrollment numbers off the top of my head, but Mendota is like 300 to 400 students, and Leopold, I believe, is over 600 students.
700.
And so I'm curious, I mean, would we consider adding that second classroom also to Leopold?
So Mendota is where we're adding the English sections. And at Leopold is the Spanish section. And so there would be the full day 4K pilot in the Spanish section, and the approximate number of students would meet the needs for one classroom currently. And so it would not be all, again, this is a pilot, so we're choosing a site to do the English, and we're doing another site to do the Spanish full day section. And so Leopold would be holding the Spanish section. So there would still be half day programming for the English sections at Leopold. And in Mendota, we would be doing the one full-time, full day 4K classroom. And so that would replace the 2 half-day programs that are there now.
Okay, so that one is not adding a brand new section. It's replacing what we already have.
Correct.
Okay. I guess I would just encourage us to maybe look at an English and a Spanish section at Leopold, if that's a possibility as you go forward and look at the pilot. So. Yeah, thank you for this information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Gloria and Carusi.
I think most of my questions have been asked. The only clarification I need is in the budget. So it looks like we're relying on referenda funding for the pilot to roll out completely. So do we have so I mean, I think that's critical, right? I think for our community to know that to have this full day 4K is we really need the referenda to pass and to support this rollout. Now, do we have a plan B? What is the plan B? No, we can't at all, right? We have the funding, it looks like, for 1 year for the 2021 budget, but what are we going to do?
So Gloria, I'll take that one. So the board, as you know, has to make difficult budget decisions in any given budget year. The board has to stack up your priorities and make priority decisions within priorities, right? So with a passing referendum, or without a passing referendum, we're already looking at a very difficult 21-22 budget. We'll be under a new state biennium in a COVID kind of environment where our revenue limit probably isn't going to be any better. It might not be even as good as this year. And we're going to be looking at other challenges coming off of COVID-19 that'll affect next year's budget. So next year's budget is going to be incredibly difficult, more difficult than we even thought when we decided to put the referendum on the ballot. So is it impossible? No, but it's going to stack up amongst a lot of competing priorities in this budget. And it will be difficult in 21-22 to continue to add that kind of funding that Colleen put on that screen for you when we're looking at decreasing revenue limits and challenges that'll come out of 2021 budgets moving forward. So it's not impossible, but it's going to be incredibly difficult.
Great, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that in terms of just the whole idea of the referendum not passing. Thank you, Kelly. I think Kelly summed it up very well. But at some point, you're going to have to put a stake in the ground and say, is this an equity strategy or not? And I think this is the push we're getting from the community. What are we going to do relative to the historical achievement disparities that we've been seeing? And so if maybe we can't expand it as fast as we want to with what was shown tonight, but if you start next year, because we said we're going to start next year, and I know we've tied it to the referendum, but at some point you got to step out there, and it still gives us a baseline for a program to start evaluating to see if we do need to expand it, because we won't always be in the situation that we're in now. But I do agree it's going to be some recovery time from what's going on right now with COVID-19. But this isn't one that I think that we pull back because of we have other things. We're going to have to just make our priorities be our priorities. And right now, we have some of the worst disparities in the entire country. And what are we going to do about it? That's the question that I ask. What are we going to do? So think about that as we're going through this. Yes, we have to cut some other things or redeploy our resources in a different way, but it also may be something to start engaging the community in as well. I think if on the slide, the first year, it may have been like $276,000. And I think in a budget our size, we need to think about that with some of the current vacancies we have or other things that we could do. And then in the second year, but for the two schools they put up there, are those not two of our schools that we definitely, not that we don't need to give it to other schools, but are those two that we definitely need to be saying, okay, well, we're going to show that we're going to have extremely positive results with this. And then it becomes a model. So when things get better, we don't have to wait and put it off again. I'll stop right there. But this is an equity strategy for sure. And you're talking about Black and brown children in those buildings and poor children in those buildings. Some of our most disadvantaged in all kinds of ways, special needs. You have it all in those two buildings. So I'll stop right there.
No, thank you for bringing up the equity strategy, because that's exactly what this is. So I always like that you bring us back to that. I think that's so important. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. I don't have any other questions.
Rosie?
Thanks to everyone for all these good points, questions, answers. I think looking at the data from the Madison Education Partnership, especially when you look at it disaggregated by race, it pretty clearly shows that we are making a difference for kids of color with our 4K program. But more than that, I think it really, really calls out the opportunity gaps in this community. That kids of color don't have the same access to high quality early childhood education as white kids. And we have to do something about it. It's an obligation we have to stay in alignment with our values and our strategic framework. So I fully support moving forward on this. The comments I have are primarily focused on the two things that the board works on, which are policy and budget. And I'll start with budget. I appreciated the longer proposal that you sent out with the materials. And I know it's really difficult to model possible revenue for this program because it all depends on what kind of revenue limits we have in a given year. It depends on whether we're attracting new kids to the program versus current kids expanding into full day 4K. But I'm wondering if we could get some kind of revenue estimate on there to help us understand the gap between what we're going to get in state per pupil funding and what we as a district have to commit to, like repurposing funding to cover the difference, because we don't get full FTE reimbursement for 4K students at this point in time. I think understanding that will help us see this as a more manageable equity strategy and also understand like what scale we can start on and what scaling up actually means without a referendum or with a referendum, and hopefully at some point with state support. Kelly, I saw you turn on, so if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear that the budget that Colleen put forward is the net investment after the 0.46 is in there. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. I also, I'm curious, state reimbursement for the revenue limit is done on a 3-year rolling average. So if we're putting a pilot into place and we have kids at full-time FTE and 2 or 3 years down the road, knock on wood, the state says this is a good investment, let's invest in full day 4K, does that put us in a better position to get better state funding for full day 4K?
Sure does.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And that by itself makes it a good argument.
Yeah, it would essentially return money back to our revenue limit. Whatever we invest now would come back.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That is good to hear. So Lisa, I completely agree with you that our ECE sites are really important partners in moving forward with this work. I know from spending time at the legislature in 4K hearings that in other parts of the state, both lawmakers and childcare providers have argued against going with full day 4K because it could hurt the private sector. And I would hope that by investing in full day 4K at ECE sites, as well as in our own schools, our ECE providers will be out there being champions for changing state policy to fund this sort of thing. I know that when we made the move to just have 4K and MMSD, many of the ECE sites around the city were out there advocating for this equity strategy. So I'm just hopeful that we can continue to build those partnerships so that it's more than just MMSD asking for change. So.
Thank you, Chris, for saying that. This is an investment in our children and families and in our community, and it's an obligation that we take very seriously when we partner with our folks. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I think one group of students that hasn't been mentioned, but for whom half-day 4K is a burden, is our homeless students. And I just want to make sure that in budgeting for this new program, we're making sure that we're budgeting for adequate transportation for possibly more homeless students to be able to participate in 4K, because offering it full day just makes it feasible for families who might be moving around a lot. And also who might not be able to rely on bus transportation to get to these sites. So likewise, I'd like to just think a little bit about funding for staffing. Right now, it looks like we've got 20-to-2 staffing ratios built in, 20 kids in a classroom with a teacher and an educational assistant in the room. I'm curious what happens if we also need to have a special education assistant in the room because we have students with special needs. Does that mean we're putting 3 staff people in the room, or does that mean that that EA position becomes an SEA position? Because those are really, those are different in terms of budget impact, and those are also different in terms of the ability to manage a classroom of 20 kids. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
So staffing wise, it would be 1 teacher and a 4K educational assistant. And, the support of an SEA or an EA becoming an SEA and providing a support really depends on an individual education plan of a student and the support that a student might need. And so it's really on a case-by-case basis that you can say, sometimes, yes, there are 3, even in our current 4K program, sometimes we do need to add an additional educational assistant in the classroom to support a student's specific needs. And that's done on a case-by-case basis and based out of the child's individual education plan on what types of supports are needed to support that student.
I would also say, Chris, when we do our allocation to schools, we take a look at students who are pointed to our 4K sites, students with IEPs and the needs that, and the services, the special education services that they require as a result of the IEP that is written by a team. So it may be that additional supports, when I was a principal, I oftentimes saw a speech and language therapist working in there with a student, or some kind of related service, OTPT. So there are times when a principal has to make intentional decisions about staffing and instructional design for that 4-year-old classroom. I would also say, I don't think it's been brought up yet, but we also have a real disproportionality in our special education numbers. And this is an opportunity with 4K to really start with students early, as Dr. Jenkins talked about, and get strong instruction so those students are ready to move into 5-year-old kindergarten and be ready to learn. So we are also going to be looking at what that disproportionality rate looks like and how that may change over time. That's another piece of data, Chris, that I think is really important for us to look at.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just want to be clear, though, that there's a real difference between having an EA or an SEA as that second staff person in the classroom. If that second staff person is an SEA, their responsibility is primarily to the students that they're supporting, which could mean that you end up with one teacher really supporting 17 kids in the class and an assistant, very much supporting 3 kids. And given that our buildings aren't really set up for 4K, like we don't have bathrooms in the classrooms, things like that, we need to make sure we have adequate staffing just to be able to walk kids to the bathroom when they need to go to the bathroom, and make sure that everyone is able to get to the cafeteria safely. So I think that the 20-to-2 ratio is good as long as it's really a 20-to-2 ratio, and that if we need SEAs in the classroom to support children with special needs, that's on top of that ratio, just to make sure everybody's safe and everybody's needs are met, and that we have good teacher to student ratios for learning and to seeing our outcomes improve. And along those same lines, I think, you said several times that we are a 4K to 12 district. And with that in mind, I think we need to add 4K to the class size policy. They're not in there right now. And if we're truly a 4K to 12 district, we need to be thinking about class size at every grade level. So I would say that's a policy issue that the board needs to be taking on. As well as we need to, as a board, be very conscious and very active of the need to change state policy at the state level if we're going to be able to scale this up quickly. So we have a governor who's really supportive of full day 4K, and there are members of the legislature on both sides of the aisle who I think support full day 4K because they see it as an important equity strategy in their rural communities as well as in our urban community. And we need to continue to work to get that full FTE reimbursement for full day 4K, because that's a game changer for kids in all over the state, including Madison. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm looking, I don't see anybody else. Lisa, what's next? Or
So we hear enthusiastic support for the proposal moving forward. And we will continue to update you. We will follow the referendum. We will follow the budget process, certainly. And Colleen will be working with the community moving forward. And we look forward to being able to provide this opportunity for our students and families. And we will definitely stay in touch through both the virtual learning. We'll give you updates there, and then also with implementation of a plan for full day.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, the team, for lifting up this huge body of work. And I appreciate all the research, and I appreciate all my colleagues. Like, all the questions were so great, and conversation was pretty amazing. I think it reflects our passion and dedication to early literacy. Dr. Jenkins, do you have any final comments in regards to this presentation?
I just, again, I would just like to accentuate the fact that thank you to the team. They did a fine job. A point that Chris started to make, I wanted to just share it here, and we'll build upon it. When we're talking about early literacy, period, we have to think about our entire community. Private, public relationships we have to form private and public relationships. When we start our early literacy, science of reading, if one city school can participate, eventually we want those students coming to our school. I don't care which private entity, but it benefits the entire community for us to have an early literacy strategy. I just talked to the mayor about this today. We need to think about how do we transform our system through early literacy, prenatal, all the way through, and we need to do it as a community. So that's it. Nice job, team. And it was great hearing from you, Colleen. My first time hearing from you. I've heard about you, but you did a nice job.
Thank you.
Way to have your first introduction with like this amazing topic. Thank you so much, Colleen. Xavier, did you have something else?
Yeah, just to echo what Dr. Jenkins said, with one city or whatever, it's all hands on deck for kids in our city. So, we have to commit to working with everyone. It's all hands on deck.
Thank you so much, Xavier. With that, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Gloria.
Gloria, second. All those in favor say, oh, Julia, your advisory vote. Oh, sorry, Nikki. Sorry, Nick. No, Julia, your advisory vote.
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening and great rest of your week.
Take care, Nanda. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Barb.
Thank you.